Shabbat Shalom. This is Shabbat Vatetze, and we're looking at the parasha from Bereshit. And Yaakov went out from Beersheba. Vatetze means and he went out. This parasha narrates a period of 20 years in the life of Yaakov. It begins with Yaakov leaving his home in the area of Beersheba. In that day, it was simply an oasis and a trade center due to its water supply. And he went from there to go to his mother's brother's home, who lived, Lavan lived in Haran. This is where Avram and Sarah had come from, and of course it was outside the limits of the promised land. Yaakov left his home because Esau, his twin brother, not only desired but actually planned to kill him. This reading ends with Yaakov's departure from his uncle's home and his return to the land of promise. From this time onward, this land will be called Eretz Yisrael, literally the land of Israel. Parashat Vatetze is written in a unique style. It is usual for paragraphs in the Torah scroll to be separated by blank spaces. Now, we all know that in a Torah scroll there is no punctuation, so that no sentences as such, and there are no capital letters. Torah scrolls use these separations in order to demonstrate closure in a way similar to our modern punctuation. There are two types of separation between paragraphs. Ptucha, which is open, when the text of the next paragraph begins a new line, and shtuma, which is closed, when the next paragraph begins on the same line. Ptucha usually indicates a major shift or change in topic, while a shtuma indicates a more subtle one, although, of course, there are always exceptions. One of the exceptions is Parashat Vatetze, which has been written with no separations between paragraphs. This parashat is one very long paragraph, which is easy to notice if you're reading from a Sefer Torah. Can anything special be learned from the style of this parashat? Written with no pauses, as if one paragraph. Our sages have thought that this style has meaning. It reminds us that Yaakov never stopped thinking about the land of Israel during the whole of the 20-year period in which he lived in Haran. Every day of his stay outside the land, he thought about his home, his homeland, until finally he returned. As there is no pause in the written text, so there was no pause in our father Yaakov's thought about the land of promise, even when he was in the act of fleeing from it. This concept is very appealing, and I believe that it's applicable to the entire history of our people, as well as a strong reminder to us today. As we know, the majority of our people were exiled from our land by the Romans in the 1st century CE. This exile, as with earlier exiles, was neither our desire nor our plan. Of course, there has always been a Jewish minority living in the land of Israel, in or around Jerusalem, in Sfat, in Tiberias, and other areas. But it took nearly 2,000 years until we, the Jewish people, were able to return to Israel en masse in order to reestablish ourselves in the land of our fathers as a sovereign nation. During this very long period, our people never stopped thinking about the land of Israel and never stopped hoping and praying to return to it. In every prayer, at every festival, in the midst of every wedding, Jews scattered across the face of the earth thought about Israel without pause, like our patriarch Yaakov, while he was in Haran. The Hatikva, our national anthem, declares, as long as the Jewish spirit is yearning deep in the heart, with eyes turned toward the east, looking towards Zion, then our hope, the 2,000-year-old hope, will not be lost, to be a free people in our land, the land of Zion and Jerusalem. So Yaakov left home. He wasn't exactly running away, but his parents urged him, and so he set out for Haran because his brother vowed to kill him. Yaakov was deprived of the home comforts he had known all his life and what he had taken for granted. He was without friends, provisions, or family support, and in fact had much less than his grandfather Abraham when he had chosen to follow God and leave everything he knew behind. He had less than his mother Rivka when she left Haran. And now he was leaving the land of promise behind, and with it his hopes, his aspirations, his inheritance. Yaakov walked one full day away from home, and night fell. He was alone. He had never been so alone and so uncertain about his future. He had no clear goals or direction except to go to the childhood home of his mother, which she had not seen for 50 years. Only days earlier, his future had seemed secure and assured, as he clearly walked in the footsteps of his grandfather and his father. He had no knowledge of the place that he was going to. He was being sent there by his parents, but he knew nothing of his relatives. He couldn't imagine what they would expect of him, and this might have been just as well as it turned out. He was uncertain of his welcome, and he could only wonder about his future prospects. But consider God's dramatic intercession in the life of Yaakov, beginning right here. Yaakov was outward bound. That's an interesting phrase. I don't know what it means to you, but the organization of that name was founded by Dr. Kurt Hahn, a German Jew, who also founded Gordonstone. Their statement of purpose: achieve something truly remarkable, wave goodbye to what you know, and create new experiences. Yes, Yaakov was definitely waving goodbye. When he left Beersheba, everyone he had known and loved, his parents, his friends, his companions, were behind him. He left the past, and he journeyed towards the unknown future. Like all human beings, he found the unknown mystifying, perhaps even fearful, terrifying. He traveled towards Haran and the yet-to-be-known. He went seeking relatives he knew nothing about except what his mother remembered from a time 50 years earlier when she was little more than a child. He was sent to find a wife from among the daughters of Lavan, his mother's brother, not even knowing if Lavan was still living or if he had unmarried daughters or what they would be like if they did exist. He went because both of his parents had a strong faith in God and his family trusted in God. They knew the God who gave Yitzchak to Abraham and Sarah, the God who incredibly provided his mother for his father, the same God who provided him and his brother when his parents prayed for children. Yaakov hoped that this God, the God of his parents and his grandparents, would meet his needs and guide him now in the same way. His thoughts at this moment were clearly not on his own faith. They were on that of his parents and his grandparents. God was to him at this moment the God of Abraham and Sarah, his grandparents, the God of Yitzchak and Rivka, his parents. Although his journey seemed purposeful and it had a clear destination, it was a journey from the known to the unknown. As he endeavored to create a new life for himself based in his own experiences and his own knowledge, rather than that of his parents and his grandparents. At this point in his life, Yaakov was given a dream by Hashem. The location Yaakov chose for that night was not special in any way. Yaakov was simply tired, so he interrupted his journey to rest. The night was too dark for him to carry on walking. Imagine trying to walk in the dark in a desert night over rough and rocky terrain. There was nothing soft or comfortable about this place, and there was no one to comfort or reassure him at this time of great need and uncertainty. So that's what he thought. But as he laid down to sleep on his makeshift bed of sand and rocks, God interceded in his life on the very first day of his outward journey by giving him a vision and a hope. Yaakov was shown a ladder based on the earth, reaching to heaven. He saw Malakim, messengers of God, ascending and descending. What Yaakov didn't realize was that the Malakim he now saw had surrounded him even when he had been completely unaware of them. And he saw the persona of God himself standing above the ladder, an experience not described previously in the scriptures, although this kind of vision was given later to prophets like Yeshayahu and Yechezkel. Have you ever played the board game Snakes and Ladders? Often as children we play this game. But did you know that the game was first introduced in Victorian England from India? Originally, believe it or not, it was a game to educate young Hindus. If you behaved well, you ascended to a higher level of life. Inappropriate behavior resulted in reincarnation on a lower level. The symbol of the ladder leading to a higher state is found in many cultures, and at first glance, this ladder seems to be the same. Is this a stairway to heaven, the place of God's abode? The sulam that leads to heaven is usually translated ladder, but you don't have to be a Led Zeppelin fan to come up with what might be a better alternative: stairway. Yes, sulam can also be translated ramp or a series of steps. But what is interesting about this particular stairway is the movement of these Malakim. They were proceeding up and down. Why up and down? Why not down and up? The commentators of Midrash Genesis Rabbah suggest that messengers of God had been accompanying Yaakov on this journey, and thus they were already on earth. But we may also see them in another way, as descending, leaving Haaretz with Yaakov, while those who were remaining in the promised land were ascending. We use the term aliyah for going to the land of Israel, making aliyah, going up to the land of Israel. Let's pause for a moment. I want each of you to picture an angel. You will think most likely and most immediately of a glowing being cloaked in white, perhaps tinged with pink, wings flapping and a golden halo glistening overhead. Or perhaps you conjure up the darling image of Raphael's cherubs, one of those cute little figurines that has recently returned to popularity. Does Judaism believe in these beings, these angels? Many Jews would probably say no, or I don't think so, or probably not. Though the scriptures tell us that these beings do not have the appearance of Raphael's winged babies, we Jews do believe in angels. Yes, we do. The problem is that when we throw the word angel around, all of us have different associations with that word. Maybe it's a guardian angel, also popular at the moment. That is, some creature looking out for you specifically. Or maybe in your mind, angel describes those in the Olam Haba, the world to come. Or are angels the manifestation of your conscience, sitting on your shoulder, trying to sway you to walk down a path of righteousness? The Hebrew word for angel, the word I've been using, is malak. But the word malak more accurately means messenger. When God sent a messenger to Lot and his family, that was a malak. If a king sends a treaty to a neighboring kingdom, the one who delivers the royal message is also a malak. Is this confusing? When we say malak, are we talking about angels or are we talking about human beings? This morning, we read the famous account of Yaakov's ladder. On that ladder, Yaakov saw angels. V'hinei Malachi Elokim Olam Yordim Bo. And behold, the messengers of God are ascending and descending on it. Messengers of Hashem. We might easily overlook this verse and ignore it as Yaakov's fanciful imaginations, but the description of the vision is compelling. The Malakim were going up, then down. They were starting here on earth, taking a quick trip up to the heavens, and then returning. In this vision, the Malakim were already on the ground. These messengers of God had been with Yaakov all the time. Just as now, there are angels all around us, wherever we are, tending to God's divine will and purpose. According to tradition, angels, Malakim, have but one mission in their existence, and then they return to God. Hence, the crossroads at Yaakov's ladder. One angel might deliver the message to Sarah that she's going to bear a child. Another angel might wait with us in the dark, cold room outside a loved one's OR. Another angel may help us catch our breath after we've had a fight with our parents or sibling, our spouse, or our children. Angels, God's Malakim, are everywhere. Their appearance, that is not what matters. Knowing they are here, this knowledge can help us get through the day or the hour. And Yaakov also heard the voice of Hashem. Yaakov knew it was God because he clearly identified himself first as El Elyon, eternal God, and then by his personal identification, Yad He Vav He, and finally as the God of Yaakov's grandfather and father, the God who had a personal relationship and a covenant with Yaakov's family. God made it clear to Yaakov that he had already planned to establish this covenant with Yaakov. Yaakov was chosen, not his brother. Just as God had established the original covenant with Yaakov's grandfather, Abraham, and his father, Yitzchak. This covenant relationship included the promise of all the land of Canaan, which he was just about to leave. God promised Yaakov's descendants would be multiplied into a great nation, although at this point he had no wife and no children. And this nation would spread out in every direction. The Goyim, the nations, would be blessed in and through Yaakov and his descendants. And God promised that he would always be with Yaakov, even outside the land of promise. God declared that he would return Yaakov to the land of his birth. And God pledged that he would perform everything he promised. This is an oath. I am with you and will keep you in all the places where you go, and will bring you again into this land, for I will not leave you or forsake you. Often, in the midst of your own journey, even if you have friends and family around you, you may feel abandoned and alone, as did Yaakov. Ultimately, no matter how many people or how many possessions you may surround yourself with, you must still face solitude. You are alone with yourself and with God, no matter where you go. The future, no matter how you plan it, is still unknown territory, providing no safe refuge. This is perhaps why so many people live in the past. At such a time, you need to meet with God as Yaakov met with him. Often God must bring us to the end of ourselves and our own resources, to the end of our own strength, in order to find us open to Him. We know that God's door is always open. God welcomes you to commune with Him intimately at any time and in any place. What was Yaakov's response? Immediately, Yaakov became aware of God's presence and His promises. Although he had not realized that God was with him before this time, Yaakov now has this insight into the reality of God's presence. And he responded to God with holy fear, awe, and reverence. Yaakov was overwhelmed by this visitation, and he knew that he must memorialize the event in a unique way. He had come to know that God had been with him and would continue to be with him wherever his journey would take him. But the place of their meeting, that point at which Yaakov came to know God's presence and intentions towards him, would always remind him of the impact of that meeting and the changes that it had brought to his life. At this intersection between himself and Hashem, Yaakov offered an oblation of oil, setting up stones of remembrance, as of course is customary to this day. He named the place Beit El, the house of Elohim, the place where God dwells. Then Yaakov made promises to God. In response to God's promises and declarations to him, although God had asked nothing of Yaakov, God promised to meet all of Yaakov's needs and return him safely to his father's land, now his land. And now Yaakov acknowledged God as his God, no longer merely the God of his parents and grandparents. From this time on, God will be known as the God of Yaakov, eventually, when his name is changed, the God of Israel, the name by which God is known most throughout the scriptures. Of all that God would give him, Yaakov promised 1/10 of it to God. Recognition of accepted practice, which is later, of course, codified in Torah. Our Torah portion ends in the same way it begins. Vayelech Haranah, and Yaakov went to Haran. V'Yaakov halak ledarko, and Yaakov went on his way. But Yaakov is not the man who left Beersheba. He's a changed person. He knows about the Malakim now, and his understanding and gratitude for God's presence is overpowering. Instead of heading out to just some place, Haran, Yaakov is heading on his way with confidence and trust in the God who is his God. He has faith and he has support. We have learned here, as Yaakov has learned, that he is in the company of the Malakim of God. These messengers of God met Yaakov along his way because it's the angel's responsibility to meet us where we are. But their meeting takes on greater meaning once Yaakov was ready to be met, once he was prepared to see the stairway. Yaakov declared, God was in this place, and I didn't know it. How is it possible that God was here and I was unaware of his presence? I believe we can find added value in our lives and receive God's blessing more readily with the knowledge that angels are busy around us. But remember, the word is malak, the messenger of God. One can be either human or divine. And sometimes God's messengers are human. This understanding should encourage each of us to allow God to use us as his messengers, but also to receive as messengers those who God sends. We can carry out God's will by showing love and compassion, providing help, instructing others, pursuing justice, feeding the hungry, and especially by helping our brothers and sisters in Israel at this time. And although we can rest assured that divine angels are often the ones that provide help and light on our way, we can all serve as Malakim b'Hashem. Be assured, God is involved in your life as he was in Yaakov's. Yes, Yaakov did have a special calling upon his life, which began even before he was born, unbeknownst to him. It became a relationship with God at the point of God's intercession. God sought Yaakov out, not the other way around. But remember that God seeks those who seek him. God made unconditional promises to Yaakov, which had nothing to do with anything that Yaakov could or would do for him. When we enter into a relationship with God through the atonement of Mashiach Yeshua, based in God's instructions to us through his scriptures, we begin our life's journey. Every moment takes us further from the beginning of life and closer to its conclusion and to the rewards God has put in place for us. It is God's desire that this journey will draw us to him as participants in the covenant established with Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Israel. We see the chesed, the rakamim, the goodness and mercy, Melech David speaks of in Tehillim 23, and the providence of God in the life of Yaakov, as in our own lives, if we look back. God's time to visit is often when we feel most forsaken, most alone. His assurance comes when we are ready to receive it. Melech David wrote in Tehillim 27, verse 10, "When my father and my mother forsake me, then Adonai will take me up." Your parents might not forsake you, but they may no longer be in your life because they've passed away, or even because they live at a distance. God provides consolation and comfort by assuring us that we have both an omniscient guide and an omnipotent guard, one who goes before us and follows behind us. Many promises in the scriptures are extended to us by God. Rav Shaul wrote in Ephesians 3, "May your roots go down deep into the soil of God's marvelous chesed, and may you be able to feel and understand, as all God's children should, how long, how wide, how deep, and how high his love really is, and to experience this love for yourselves, though it is so great that you will never see the end of it or fully know or understand it. And so at last you will be filled with God himself. Glory be to God, who by his mighty power at work within us is able to do far more than we would ever dare to ask or even dream of, infinitely beyond our highest prayers, desires, thoughts, or hopes." Finally, listen to these words of Melech David. "Therefore, let everyone who is godly pray to you while you may be found. Surely when mighty waters rise, they will not reach him. You are my hiding place. You will protect me from trouble and surround me with songs of deliverance." The same God who spoke to Yaakov, who ministered to Yaakov through his Malakim, who guided the course of Yaakov's life, who sustained him and kept him in all situations, that same God is with you and me. Shabbat Shalom.